Yo, what's good, folks? Welcome to the Hangout. You know who it is. It's your boy, Juan Miguel, and we're back again today with another episode of the Hangout. And I am hanging out today with a few of my guys from across the sky. You all know these people. They need no introduction, but I'm going to introduce them anyway. We got my man, 100 Grand, Y Hunter Music, Yawns in the building. We know we got my man, De Levanta from Atlanta. He is hanging with us, super dope engineer. And we got the man, the myth, the legend, none other than Aaron Sticks Smith. You know what I mean? We out here doing the thing. So y'all give it up for the crew. Y'all give it up for my esteemed guests. What y'all on? What y'all up to, bros? I think everybody's still on mute. Y'all still on mute?
Nah, we here.
Yeah. All right, man.
Yeah,
we in the building.
Chilling, bro.
We in the building. So we got a dope conversation that we're gonna do today. Something that's been kind of brewing on the socials. Honestly, it's, this conversation has been a point across the land for like the social land for like the last, I know I'm it's like the transposing conversation when it comes to like producers and engineers and with keyboard players when they're talking about transposing. You start talking about triggers, drum samples, all of that stuff, you start triggering the drummers. So that's why we kind of played around with the words with the title of this particular live, where we say drummers are triggered by this. So we're gonna try to dig in deep on this conversation. So I got a few really dope people in the conversation, as you can see, and I think this is gonna help us have a nice balanced conversation on this particular topic, because you got Aaron, who is the drummer extreme. You got my man Jan, who is a drummer as well, and he's also a producer, and he's an artist, and he's an engineer, so he mixes. Then you got Dale, who's a drummer and an engineer and a mixer. And then you got me. I'm not a drummer at all, but I'm a mix engineer and a producer and a musician, and I'm on team. You gonna get these samples. You go get these samples, Doc. But no, so I think this is gonna be a really dope conversation. How y'all feeling, dog? How y'all feeling, though?
Great, man.
Good.
Feeling great.
Yeah,
Feeling great. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think the community is going to really tap in with us on this. So I want to kick this off really quickly with this right here. Let's take a look at this. This was a post by Aaron. Aaron smacked us 2 days ago with this status. My man, I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it how I heard it. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna read it how I heard. This is probably not how he said it. You know, he's probably nice and calm. Aaron got that nice, calm and soothing voice. I read it like this. As a professional musician who has studied and taken major pride in my sound and tones and mics and preamps and studio capture, I absolutely hate sound replacement. I've made sure that you do not have to replace anything on my drums when I send you files. If you replace my drums, it's out of convenience. Not because I had bad capture or bad tones, but here we go. Because you were lazy when you made it to where you barely have, when I made it to where you barely have to EQ my drums. And he goes on with the rest of another paragraph talking about all of the other stuff. But I like this part where he says down here, he says, what's crazy is the amount of recordings I've done all over the world weekly. Every genre that I played on. Only gospel is the genre that my drums are replaced in, not R&B, jazz, fusion, country, even metal. Yes, I played in a metal band. No one replaces my drums but gospel engineers. And at the same time, and it's the same toms and same snare drum every single time. Slap face emoji. So that's what my man hit us with 2 days ago, which ensued a lot of stuff. So man, let's dig into what was what was that about? What prompted that?
Okay, so what prompted it? First of all, I did not say it like that.
I know he wasn't yelling.
That makes it sound
I
10
read it
times
like that. No,
worse.
I'm just joking.
That made it sound 10 times worse than what I
I
meant. But
know.
honestly, you know what prompted it? What prompted it was I was in the car with my wife. This is exactly what prompted it. I was in the car with my wife. I can't remember what record she was listening to. It was some new like gospel live record. I don't know who's done it, who's on it, nothing. It was the
Yeah.
first time I ever heard it. And it sounded really good. So I'm just listening to the drums. That's the first thing like usually like I start to kind of listen to. And I had noticed, you know, some similarities of,
Mm,
the same samples that I've been hearing just for a minute. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? And so it just made me think about the times where, I've been in situations where I was forced to have my drums replaced. And
Mm,
although I do understand completely as to why it is a great tool to have and it's a great tool to use,
mm-hmm.
sometimes I do feel like depending on the situation or depending on because I can't speak for all engineers, but
Yeah.
from some engineers that I have experienced, some have replaced drums out of it being faster and easier for them to just replace them other than just EQing them or trying to dial them in.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I have been in situations where, and I am understanding, and I understand like when it comes to overall mix, sometimes the drums may not have as much presence when it's going up against, I don't know, 60 or 70 different instruments or
Yeah.
60 or 70 different files. So you may have to layer something or add a kick drum for presence or for whatever reason. But overall, my overall gripe, I guess I would say, is if we are going to use samples or anything like that, to still keep the essence of the person playing, because now
Mm,
it comes to sampling and stuff like that, everything sounds the same. So then you lose the essence of who's playing, because at the end of the day, like our sound is us.
mm,
So
yeah.
I'm looking at it from my perspective. Like my perspective is like when you hire me or if you like what I do, then that means you like my sound and my sound choices, not just my musical ideas, but the overall sonics that I can bring to the table. Because I'm me personally, I can only speak for myself. I am not just a drummer, but I compose on the drums. That's what I say.
Yeah.
So with that being said, before I go into any type of sessions or anything, I ask a million questions. Me. I don't know if anybody else does this, but I'm like, okay, what snare drum do you hear? If they have any type of references, I ask them, is this what you want the reference to sound like? Like if you want these tones, is this what you want?
Yeah.
Because I'm coming from somebody who has 50 different cymbals, 5 different drum kits, 25 different snare drums compared to somebody who may have maybe
It's a lot,
one
bro.
kit, maybe 3 snare drums, and maybe 5 or 6 cymbals. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at it from a different perspective. So, in conclusion, to sum it up, um, me personally, I think overall, my overall gripe is like when we start replacing a lot, or if we start replacing with the same samples and stuff like that, we lose the essence of who that person was. Because a lot of times you can't even tell nowadays who played on any records because it's the same drum tones and the same drum
Yeah.
sounds. But back in the early 2000s, if you heard Marvin McQuitty play, you knew it was Marvin.
Mm,
Or if you knew, you know what I'm saying, Dave Weckl, if Dave Weckl is playing on something, you know it's Dave because of not just his ideas, but the tone of
the
his
tone.
drums,
Yeah.
his cymbals even. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's where the originality is lost. I feel like these tools are great tools when used the right way, but I feel like that they've been abused. That's
Yeah.
that's really what I was getting at.
I could see that. I could see why you would feel that way. In a sense, what I look at a lot of times with this conversation, when it comes to this conversation, And when you think about what you said about samples, everybody using the same samples, everybody using the same, snare, the same kick. When you look at other, not just other genres, but just other instrumentation, and I'm not making a point that this is right or wrong, but I'll just say this. Like when you listen to like gospel, for instance, like everybody's playing Nord right now. All these records we getting the same Royal Grand, Imperial Grand. It's the same piano sound. You know what I mean? Like when we're listening to like some of the aux stuff, I remember like, and even before, even if we go into aux, like with keys, there was a point for at least a decade and a half that power grand, full grand was on every record. That was the piano we was hearing on every record. And then before that, it was MKS.
Yeah, it's the modern. I would say the Power Grand is the modern day MKS.
Yeah, it's the MKS. Then it was MKS 20 on every record.
Yeah.
Everybody's on their Mike Burrell. Everybody was trying to be on that tip. And J-Pop brass and Profi. And we was hearing these same sounds on every record, and it became iconic because people were emulating what, not originating. Now, there was an original person that popularized the Power Grand. Mike Burrell and all of that camp popularized the MKS, and everybody tried to copy it. Even when you look at hip hop, when you look at trap, when you look at other genres, I mean, you getting 808s on every record. You getting those same 808 claps. You're hearing the same rim shot on a lot of these records. You're hearing the same whatever. You got background. You got artists that use the same background vocals. Like Kirk Franklin, we be getting the same background vocals on those songs for the last 20 years. It's the exact same flow. It's some of the same chords. So I get I understand that. I definitely understand it, and I understand how much of it always feels like a slap in the face for drummers, but I think it's not a space of engineers being lazy per se, because honestly, and I know Jan, I'll let him chime in on it, and Dale as well. When you're mixing with samples, sometimes it's more difficult to try to get a drum set or get tones or get things to fit in the mix. Sometimes using samples when you're in those cases where especially when you got something that's terrible recorded in the first place, it's difficult to try to make that work with samples. Like you get all the other toms are good, but you got a bad floor tom recording where the mic didn't work or whatever. So now I got to go try to find a floor tom that's gonna sound good in the sequence of the rest of the toms that are coming in. You know what I mean? And blending that whole vibe in. So I think there's a lot of stigmas on both sides, but I'll let my other guys kind of chime in on it as well, and what y'all kind of feel about the situation, because dialogue, talking, and then we got some examples we want to share with you guys today. This is not just tell, this is show and tell, because we want to both. Aaron's gonna share some stuff that he's recorded. I'm gonna show you some stuff that I've had the pleasure of mixing and being able to show you guys how this stuff actually works, because I think if we get an opportunity to see the process and understand the process and how this all works, then we can, like I was talking about yesterday, this is hilarious. I said, we can log off lids, we can log off our lids account, and stop capping here on the internet. And for those of you who don't know, Lids is a cap store. It's one of my favorite stores. So we can log off lids, and everybody, I'm not just talking about drummers, just all engineers, everybody can just stop. We can all log off lids. What y'all got in it, bro?
Yeah, Dale passed it to me, so right on. So I agree. I see both sides as an artist and as a musician for hire and stuff like that. So it's real touchy, but typically if someone hires you, they're most likely hiring us for our performance. You know what I mean? And especially if we're going to be recording remote, it's going to be for the performance. And in traditional settings, especially in mainstream music, you're going to come across a kit already being set up for you. They already have the tones dialed in. They already have everything they want. They just want the session player to come actually get the job done and play the song effectively. So I think we're kind of in the new age of, the bedroom producer vibes and stuff like that. And that's like your standard average recording, and especially in gospel specifically, is bedroom stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think out of the traditional context, traditionally, stuff was already set up. Like I've been in scenarios where when I call drummers to come play for me, they're playing my kit with my tones, and I already tuned everything. All they have to do is play, maybe move around
Yep.
a few things, but I've already customized it because I know exactly the tones that I want for the song. When you have to communicate tones, things get sometimes misconstrued. Like I've been working with Kevin Ross a heck of a lot, and this is not even in gospel. And he was like, "Yo, I want some Just Blaze vibes. Like, you know, you got some drum samples and stuff." I was like, "Well, I could play the drums." So I was like, you know, I'll just play. I'll play, you know, the stuff myself. And he's like, you know, Just Blaze vibes. You know, the song was already kind of on a vintage tip anyway. It's like a '70s. So it's called "Look My Way." It's out now. But anyway, my point is,
Shameless plug.
nah, the point is, he literally was like, "Yeah, give me the Just Blaze vibe." Cool. I listened, and so I cut drums, and so he was like, "Yo, bro, is there any way where we can like get it tighter?" I'm like, tighter? Like, what do we mean? What do we mean tighter? So he wanted a completely different snare. So to Aaron's defense, I had a whole nother snare to use to
That's
tune
good.
up and to get the job done. So that's where I think when it comes to tone, Aaron's point is valid because if we're doing bedroom producer style, we do have to communicate tones. So it was a little misconstrued,
That's good.
you know what I'm saying? So they are contacting you obviously for your performance, but they know you can get a good recording. Now, here's what actually happened at the end of it. I re-recorded my tones. I did the same licks, the same he went like a Just Blaze, crash, crash, snare, snare, tom, 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 whatever. And so when I heard the final, the drum edits were completely different than what I played.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, is it my performance now? That could be argued. But he restructured my licks to what he wanted it to be. Still me, I'm just edited. And so that's where it's like, I'm not the artist.
Yeah.
I'm not the artist. Like the artist is the artist. And sometimes the artists are just calling you for a little both and a little bit of tones and your performance, but they're gonna tweak it. That's gonna happen. Like they're going to tweak stuff. So in gospel, in this case, they're most likely going to add samples where you hear majority of the samples more than you do the acoustic kit is because of the freaking arrangements. Like you said, like the trend of gospel is that bigger drum sound, and so
Yeah.
that if it doesn't sound like that, people reject it sometimes, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
they reject it, you know what
There's
I'm
some
saying?
merit
Because
to that, though.
it
You know what I
it
mean?
doesn't it doesn't sound like what we're used to.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
You
Yeah,
know what I'm
because
saying?
it's
So
like not hearing 808s in a trap song.
yeah, it's just
You
kind
know,
of it's just where the industry
it's just
is.
where the sound of the industry has went to at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean. So I think in gospel we do have we are trigger happy. We do trigger a heck of a lot. We because like I take time with my drums as well. I take my time to tune, get everything right, and then just to hear someone else's toms and the snare, I'm like, all right, that's kind of we
Slap
kind
in the
of
face.
man like all the work is done. You know what I'm saying? But I understand this. I understand that they called me for my performance. Most
Mm,
importantly, I can perform and I can play on a record. Um, do I think that? I think there's a line to be drawn in the sand though, where it's like, yo, if the recording is solid, there's no bleed or major bleed in any of the mics and stuff like that. Um, that's the case. But for Aaron, like Aaron knows how to record. Aaron
yeah.
has a good setup. So he's one of those unicorns in this
Come
conversation.
on.
Your average drummer is probably recording right into a Focusrite. No preamps beforehand, no nothing. Probably about 4, 6 mics max. That's your average drum recording. Like
Yeah.
like John and I, we dealt with this full time in a production company that we both work for, and we
Yeah.
dealt with it firsthand. Like a mono overhead mic to
Come
capture
on.
everything, phenomenal. Yeah,
Come
the
on.
whole kit is being replaced for sure, even the
Yeah.
overheads because it's unusable.
It's unusable.
You know what I'm saying? So somebody mentioned a comment. I want to just address that comment we
Which one
we can
was it?
move on.
We can put it on the screen.
Yeah, I'm finding it out. It was from. It was. Let me see.
I might have pinned it already.
Yeah, maybe
Oh,
so.
good. I see he pinned it. He pinned something.
What did you? But anyway, he was saying engineers should. They should add the samples from the original kit.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember
they
seeing
should. I mean, there is no should. There is no rules for this. There's no handbook that says, "Hey, when a drummer sends you files, here is the
Exactly.
list of things you need to do to make sure that." You know what I'm saying? So it's like there is no rules. There's no should. It's what works best for the song.
Right. I think too, one of the things with that, to that point, it's those misconceptions. Like if I should replace it with the tones from the drums, then I should have gotten that from the drummer. And I think I made that as a point in my live yesterday, that like, hey, like I work with several drummers that do this. Like when they send me the record, they actually send me like a bounce of their samples, like individual hits of their toms, of their kick, of their snare at multiple velocities at that. They don't just go to the end of the session and just go, yeah, okay, here's the snare. Tom, blah, here's a tom. Floor tom, blah. No, he's giving me like doom, doom, doom. You know, I'm getting multiple velocities of those samples. So that's a point for drummers. Like if you care that much about your tones, log off lids. Log off lids and send us samples of your drums. You know, because as an engineer, like Jan made an excellent point that we don't have context. We don't know what you recorded with. We don't know how long you took the tune. We don't know what kind of kit you use. I might can listen to it and be like, that sound birch, it sound maple, or that sounds like he was using some Evans coated heads or something like that. I might could be a detective at that point, but I have no clue. I have no context. I just know this is how it sounds. This is how it fits in the context of the record. So I'm not, as an engineer, again, we're trying to move through our record, especially if it's an album. We're talking 10, 11, 12 songs that has a deadline. I'm trying to move through this thing as quickly and as efficiently as possible. That doesn't mean that I'm not taking time with everything, because I think here's the thing that I think what happens. A lot of people think this is how this process goes. They think that the engineer is getting the drums in, we're dropping them in the session, and then we're going, okay, yeah, tom sample here, kick sample here, snare, move on. 5 minutes on the drums, and I moved on to whatever else in the mix. No, like I spend hours on drums, like hours. You know what I mean? Like that, to me, that is the bulk of, especially a big gospel mix. If it's a ballad or something like that, that is the point of the mix, that we're building everything around that, because that's like my foundation. So we got to get the drums right. So I'm spending time cleaning toms, dealing with bleed. I'm spending time EQing, trying to craft a tone to fit in with that, using samples, layering snares, layering kicks. So it's just as much as an art form it is of tuning your drums and preparing them for the recording. It's a similar art form when it comes to actually trying to make samples or make drums in general work in a mix. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a process to that. It's not just click, 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 pull up a plugin and I'm done and I'm moving on to the next thing. No, like I'm sitting there spending time with that. And I don't personally replace toms unless it is just terrible. I mean, like terrible. I don't replace. I try my best to work with the toms that are there, and I try my best to work with the snare that is there. You know, now I like to layer just for that girth, just for that, and I've done hundreds of examples on my YouTube channel, on my videos of, you know, how we layer snares, how we stack snares, how we make snares sound bigger in mixes, how we get it to cut through a sea of tracks, an ocean of aux tracks and BGV tracks. So it's all about context. It's all about those type things. And even EQing is messing with your tone. I think I said this yesterday. If I touch your toms or your kick or your snare, the second I boost the frequency, I have changed your tone already. As soon as I drop a plug-in on there that has any kind of saturation built in, your tone has shifted or changed. Any type of processing, there's no, oh, these drums came in, they sound so amazing, I don't need to do anything to them. They're just dope. Just leave them alone, run them straight into the master bus and call it a day. Like, nah, like anytime we touch it, we're changing something. That's my rant. Anyway, let me throw Dale over here. Here you go, bro. It's you.
All right, cool. So yeah, I mean, everybody said all the same stuff I be thinking, and that I've been through, because I've been on both sides of this multiple times, still on both sides of this. So, you know, from the drummer's perspective, I get it. Yeah, I've spent hours on, you know, tuning my drums and putting new heads on and picking the right snare. I got a whole rack of snares out there. So that's a part of the process. And the very first time I got a record back and my drums were replaced, I definitely was livid. I flipped out. I was, you know, making phone calls trying to figure out why are we going this direction? Like, what, you know, my tones wasn't good enough, this, that, and the third. And as time went on, it just became the realization that, okay, as I was transitioning to engineer, that as the drummer, my job is to play the drums and, you know, get the sounds, make the record feel right. And then the engineer's job is to mix. They didn't hire me to mix. They hired the engineer to mix. So while I might have an opinion on what the mix should be, they didn't hire me specifically for my opinion on the mix, which is kind of one of the reasons why I transitioned into mixing mostly anyways, because like I wanted to be that person that made those decisions, and had a say so. So I made the transition over. But then, like, to Jan's point, I've walked into sessions and literally there's a drum kit set up, already tuned, already got the cymbals picked out that they want. Like, they've already done all of that, and they literally just want me to sit down and play this kit. So I'm walking in with all my stuff and realize, oh, wait a minute, y'all got something here. And it's like, they like, don't touch the drums, don't touch the snare. Like, these are the sounds we want. We just want you to play. And that's what it is. So I think, you know, that has been brought up a couple times. I think Aaron's mentioned this, and I see some of the comments people have mentioned this. Like, if that's the case, it would be nice for them to just say that. Like, just say, you just want me to play the drums. Like, say you just want me to come in, play the drums. You don't really care that much about the tones I get because you probably going to replace them or something like that. So, you know, the communication definitely could be better in some situations. But again, like sometimes, you know, as an engineer, as a mixing engineer, you coming into the situation late. You wasn't even the recording engineer. So the recording session was one thing, and then it gets to mix, and it's like, okay, when they recorded, it was a bare bones track with drums, bass, guitar, and dummy keys. Then when it comes to mix, we done went from this dummy track to now we got 150 tracks, and we got to figure out how in the world am I gonna make all of this work in the mix and still keep everything present. And one of the first things that happens is, the drums. We need some more punch on the drums. They still got to be hitting and they got to cut. And there's only so much processing you can do to a drum kit by itself before it becomes over processed and it's like it just don't sound good at all. Because then you start, like, the toms are super compressed, or you don't put so much high end in it that it sounds like a timbali. And it's just like, okay, wait a minute. The only way to make this work is to add some samples to this and to, you know, enhance it. Like, me personally, and I know John the same way, like, we don't completely replace unless it's just terrible and we gotta replace. Most of the time, it's what we call augmentation. It's adding to. So it's like, in the scope of the mix, if you was to go and do a full breakdown of the mix, you would hear, oh, there is my original snare tone, there is my original tom tone, but in the context of the mix, it may not stand out that way, but it's the culmination of all that together. It's just like, you know, for example, a bass guitar, like the bass player might have a lot of lows and really just smacking the lows, but in the record, I need to add some more high mids to it. So I might duplicate that bass track, keep his low track in there, but then have this other one that's got a little bit more presence. And then when somebody pulls it up on their iPhone, they still hearing the bass like, oh, the bass sound good on my phone. Yeah. It's because I enhanced it with some extra frequencies that we wouldn't have had if we would have only used the low. So it's a combination of all the things. And of course, again, we got some drummers that just don't have adequate recording situations, even though they think they do. They just simply don't. And having those conversations, we can definitely have those conversations.
Definitely.
But you know, if you only sending in one bass drum track, you're gonna get a sample because we need the inside and we need the outside. Like we need that full sound. Like the snare. If you only have a top mic and there's no bottom, I gotta add some bottom. I need the sizzle from there. So in those cases, like, okay, I need this. You know, I've been in sessions, like I recently had a record that I tracked for and I had to have somebody else mix it. And the session, there was a lot of things going on in the session technically. And by the time we got to like being ready to actually track, I knew that there was bleed in the snare from the hi-hat because I didn't put it in the normal spot just because I was doing so much other stuff trying to get the session to go. But I just knew, okay, this is one of the things I can let slide. Like the overheads, I got to get right. Time, I got to get right. But the snare, having some bleed from the hi-hat, I can let that slide because I know that on the mixing side, a sample could be thrown in here or whatever to kind of circumvent that. So that was a decision that was made even from my perspective as an engineer. In the moment, I said, you know what, this is what's going to happen with that because of. Now, if it would have been a session with a producer in the session and we had time to go back and forth and talk about it, like, hey, it's been 45 minutes. We finally got drums. Do you want me to go in there and, fix the snare mic and get it, to a better position? Yeah. Then they might say yeah, or they might say nah, because we on the clock. We got to get out of here. So that kind of stuff comes up too, man. Sometimes people come in and they want to track 3 records in 1 hour, which is like, it's just crazy that people want to do that. Yeah. But it's like, hey, if it's your time, you paying for it. So if that's what you want to do, let's go. And then what comes out of that is what it is, and then when you get the record back and it's all, they done mangled your drums, it's like, hey, you didn't take no time.
That's some of the normative stuff that ends up happening. That's the kind of stuff that we end up getting. You know what I mean? We, like the perspective is like when you got like an Aaron or a Jan, you got people like that care about tones and care about, how it sounds when it's going in and what the outcome of it is. That's non-normative. That's why I'm like, y'all need to log off lids. Y'all need to take off the lids name tag, and just quit your job at lids. Somebody put log off lids in the comments. Hashtag log off lids. Log off lids. Drop that in the chat for me. Y'all need to, because most of y'all don't stay with the process long enough to actually show us that you care. You know how many drummers I actually hear from during the process of a record when it's being mixed? Not a one. You know how many drummers I hear from after the mixes came out? Just about all of them. They don't care. You know what I mean? You don't really care. You say you care, but you don't really care that much to be involved enough in the process from start to finish. I've had maybe a couple of records. I think it was something, I want to say Jeremy Wimbush was on it, and I heard from him. I want to say that's what it was. I can't remember the name of the record. It's been so much over the last year. But I heard from that drummer on that record. That's non-normative. Normative is y'all got the lid shirt on after the record comes out. You know what I mean? We see y'all on Facebook with lids on.
Now
on
I got
chest.
a couple of drummer clients that actually they come to me to track, like they're drummers and they come to me because they want me to track their drums because they like the sound that I get for them. Yeah. In those situations, I'm going to bat for you. Like if
definitely.
drums get replaced and it's all just completely different, I'm on the email chat at that point. Like, hey, I recorded this. What's up? Like, what's the problem?
And that's what you should
I know
do.
my sounds.
That's what we should do. There's this comment that popped up. I know Jan saw it and he told me to pull it up. I'm gonna let you respond to it, Jan. My man's.
We got a couple of them. We got a couple of them.
Yeah, it's a whole pin thread. Just go to the pin thread.
This is what this is. We hanging out. We don't have an agenda. This is the hangout. We hanging out. We having a conversation. You guys are a part of the conversation as well. So my man Roderick Darling, I know I probably screwed your name up. Sorry, it's country me. He says, does the engineer care that the same sample or replacement that's used in 200 other records, even if the drums need replacing? A lot of this convo is the records that have the same sample. I'd say do the same 808s need to be used on all of these trap records? Do we need to get these same trap hats on all these? Do we need to get the same Nords, piano on all these records? Do we need to get the same J-pop bells that y'all been putting up? Do I need to get the same MKS 20 that's been on 300, 400,000 records? Do I need to get the same Birch kit, the same Tama, whatever, the same PDP? Do I need to get the same Ibanez bass? Are we using the same heads? Are we using the same? I mean, that's just people use what they use, but the engineers get the bad rap for using in gospel for using the same samples. But anyway, Jan, you up, Doc? Here you go.
I mean, he basically, he
basically roll it, Doc. I'm just gonna throw you up there.
Yeah, I mean, you basically man. The thing in gospel is we're the only genre where we have 150 tracks of synths.
Come on,
all playing the same thing.
Come on,
all playing the same part. Not this one comes in here, this one comes in there, but literally, I've seen sessions where, because I've mixed them. I've had sessions where there's literally 6 synths, six synths. Say that 6 times fast. But yeah, bro, like straight up, like just stacked, and I'm like, great. And then I got a one directional mic snare to combat all of these synths. So the obvious solution is well, we got to add some samples. And the funny thing is, we actually got a bad rap prior. On my drums sound too thin. They sound too thin. I mean,
man, come on,
bro. I mean, I got one top mic and maybe 2 overheads. It's not gonna cut through all of these synths. So I think we have to just understand the genre requirements and genre criteria. If it's gonna have the same samples, probably because it's successful. That sound has been successful.
Exactly.
Yosh has how many Grammys stacked up like in his spot?
Yeah,
for all his work.
8 or 9 of them.
So somehow, some way it's working. And I'm a rebel, so I'm the cousin. I told John I'm the cousin that comes through and at the gospel cookout. I'm a rebel, like I'm the black sheep of the family. So I think that to back up the community, I think it's a bigger issue. I think we are, as a whole in the genre, are scared to branch out with a whole nother vibe. I think we're, and the funny thing is I've talked to execs that's on the other side of this, and they're like, yo, we don't have a Christian R&B lane that someone is actually doing hardcore R&B to push right now. Like, if they're independent, we don't know where they are. We don't know.
Everybody's trying to sound like Mav City or Todd Galber. Everybody's trying to cop the Todd Delaney sound. I talked with Yosh once. We sat down. We had a conversation, and it's on video. It's on one of our videos. I think on one of the things we was doing with the warehouse video. And Yosh said it or no. It's on the Hangout episode we did where we actually interviewed John Blast and John Yosh. We have an interview on here on the channel. If you're watching on YouTube, you can go and look at that. It's an episode with John Yosh and John Blast, 2 top engineers in gospel. We pin that because we're gonna come back to that, because that's a lot of the reason why where we are. They're the engineers in gospel right now.
That part.
And Yosh said something during that interview that was powerful. I mean, we're talking about Yosh, the guy who has mixed like 90% of the stuff we're talking about. And he said, I want gospel to change. He said, I'm tired of the stuff that I'm getting. I get the same. He has the same complaints that we have. You know why it sounds the same? Because we're getting the same stuff. The innovation has nothing that we're looking for has nothing to do with what sounds we're using. You know what I
Right.
mean? What samples we're using. Honestly, I think somebody said it in the comments. That's a mute point. Like, we got to get back. And Yosh said it in the video. He said gospel needs to get back to the roots. It needs to get back to its sound. And I think Aaron, you said it earlier about, you know, how early 2000s, late 90s gospel, you know, where the heyday, in my opinion, of where gospel really was shining. At least that's where I grew up in. I know other people say 80s and 70s and all of that. But the genre, the era that I grew up in, like you said, everybody had a sound. John P. Key's songs didn't sound like Kirk Franklin songs, and Kirk Franklin songs didn't sound like Kurt Carr, and Kurt Carr didn't sound like Marvin Sapp, and Commission didn't sound like, you know what I mean,
Any of
5-7.
them. Any of them.
Yeah,
Everybody had a sound.
everybody had an
Go ahead.
identifiable sound, and I think that's where I'm coming from
Yeah,
overall. It's like,
definitely.
what do we do to change that? Now, a lot of that comes from, like you said, everybody copies what they hear and what they like and what works. I think
Mhm.
that's where things go wrong. Just like
Truth.
you know what you just said as far as the synth sounds, keyboard sounds, all that stuff. Like for the longest, you heard all those same sounds, and I think, I don't know, from my perspective, I'm the type where I always want to sound different, and I always will purposely use different sounds, or you know, I try to go above and beyond to like evolve and recreate like my own sound. And you
True.
know, growing up, I think I'm one of the last generations, I could say, that has seen life before social media.
Come
So
on, Doc.
it's like I understand and I can comprehend that the number one thing when it comes to musicians in general or artists is the only thing that we have is our sound. So I think that's the reason why I was so passionate about the whole conversation about sound replacing, because like Jan said, I am one of the few, or we are one of the few that really go in depth about our tones and miking situations. Like I'm always getting pointers from anybody that I look up to as far as like how can I enhance
That's good, bro.
sounds from home. Do I
Yep.
need to add more microphones? What microphones do I need to buy? How can I, you know, I like, for instance, I got a homie named Alex. He's an amazing mixing engineer. So I ask questions like, why do people use the SM7B without the, on a hi-hat? What does
Mm,
that do? Why is that a Nashville thing? Or why
that's
do
good.
people use the SM7B on a ballad snare? What does that do? Like I'm always trying to pick somebody's brain or asking like what type of plugins could I use, or what can I do to enhance my sound.
Come on.
Mhm.
And
But
so
that's what we should be doing.
yeah,
Like they should be asking these questions, but they're not asking these questions. They got
yeah.
the lid shirt on. They done logged in the lids. I'm
And
telling
that's
you,
why
y'all.
it's a lot of bad drums being sent. It's a lot of
Yeah.
bad drums.
You don't know how to record. You haven't took the time to understand what drums are supposed to sound like. You haven't sat with people long enough. You've watched a handful of YouTube videos. You asked a couple of questions in some Instagram DMs, and now you think you're an expert and you got your lid shirt on and you out here capping.
And you got your
But
digital
here's
Digital reference, the CAD joints. The
hey,
digital
hold on
reference,
now.
I couldn't think
I
of them
got a
yesterday.
video on digital reference mics now.
I do
Hold on.
too. And that's why I do too. When the pandemic first started, I had a whole set of digital reference mics, and then
Wow.
I had some SM57s for my snare. But I
There you
instantly
go.
upgraded fast
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I wanted to cut records, and I knew I couldn't cut records with those.
Yeah.
You
Like I
can.
just
You can.
You got to.
absolutely. And I
But
have.
yeah, like everybody, it's y'all 100% right. And then sometimes, so what it comes down to also is we talk about getting drums, and this kind of came up pre-show. Sometimes drummers will sweeten their own drums. So they'll do EQ, compressor. They'll do some rough mixing on their drums, and then when they send it to the client to listen to for approval, that's what the client hears. But then when they send it to mix, they take all of that stuff off and send the raw drums unprocessed without their tones, and then they get a mix back that's different. It's like, well, you didn't even give us what you started with.
Come on.
As a mixing engineer, one of the things I ask for, if you're working in Pro Tools, give me the session. Like, give me your entire session.
That's good.
Let me see what you got going on, what's there, what's already in place, the type of sound you got. I tell producers when they ask me, yo, how do you want my sense? Like, hey, whatever effects you got on there already, leave them. Those are the sounds you like. It's got the process you like. I'm going to start there in my mix. Like, I don't want to undo everything y'all done spent 3 months working on. Like, I want to start with where you're at and then polish that piece of it. So if you sweeten your drums, you should send the sweetened drums. And if you want to send both files, you want to send sweetened and the raw, do that. But don't just send the raw if you've already sweetened them and the artist loves the sweetened drums. That sometimes that happens, is like they love that sweetened sound. Even vocals. An engineer will send vocals all auto-tuned and beautifully sounding to the artist to listen to, and then they approve that to go to mix, and then the mixing engineer gets it, and it don't have none of the stuff on it. It's like, yo, where's the file that they love?
I think that's where I kind of go wrong, if I could be honest, because like if I send out if I'm working for an artist, I'll send what my sweetened drums are.
That's good.
But usually the reason I do send the raw files is because they tell me to send the raw files. Because I always ask before I send, I'm like, do you want them raw or do you want my effects on them? And everybody's like, send them raw. I'm like, oh, okay, cool.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so here's where that conversation, I guess, needs to shift. So people's understanding of what the raw files are is a little skewed, because as time has progressed, what the raw files were has changed. If you go back to 80s, 90s, when everybody's in a major recording studio tracking through a console, tracking through preamps, through compression, through all this stuff, maybe even going through tape, the files that were recorded that were raw have all of that stuff on it. Like that's what the sound is. Yeah. So when it goes to mix, it's got all of that niceness on it, because that's what they recorded. That's the raw file. So I think now in the modern age, we got to start thinking about, okay, the process sound that I end up with after I'm done with the session, that's the new raw, because that's the way the drums sound. That's the way the keys sound. That's the way everything sounds, because now we've processed it and put it through all the stuff. That's the pre-production side of it. Now we're going into mix to polish all of that, not going back to the bottom.
For real, because I've been in sessions where when we got to the end of the recording session with drums and everything, the joint sounded like it was mixed. I'm like, what are we doing with this? Like, you finna mix this? Like, this sounds ready to go on the radio. Like right now, we can go to radio with this. That's how good it is, because great engineers, especially recording engineers like your Danny Duncans, even Yosh. We have again, shameless plug, dope class on the site where Yosh goes through his process of recording, and it sounds finished. They record with the end in mind, so you're not getting that sound with 8 digital reference mics plugged up to a Focusrite. You not getting that. You just not getting that. That's not happening. So when you're saying I'm getting tones, these are my tones. You talking about you tuned your drum and you got it all straight or what have you. And you plugged up to your digital reference and all of that, or your Shure PG joints up. And you plugged it up to the Focusrite, the 8-channel joint. You got a mono overhead, and then you sent those files. There's no other processing in between that and the Focusrite. There's nothing else between that. You just plug that in, and you expect us to preserve that. And you out here with your lid shirt on with that. And I was so petty about it. Look, I was so petty. I was feeling so petty about this yesterday. I almost went to Lids last night and bought a Lid shirt. I was gonna be on the live with a Lid shirt on. I was feeling so petty, but I didn't. I went with Batman this morning. But no, so this is a good segue. I want to. We're talking about like raw files and stuff like that. I'm gonna pull up my screen here. Give me a second. I'm gonna pull up my screen here. We're gonna actually, because like I told you guys earlier, this is show and tell. So I don't want to just show. We don't just want to talk about this. Let's actually look at some examples. So I pulled a couple of examples. I think Aaron sent me an example. So let's go here. You guys see my screen?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. We live then. All right, so this is Logic. I don't have Pro Tools on this particular machine, on my streaming machine, so I just pulled Logic up. It's the same because we're just listening to literal raw audio, raw drums. All right. So here's some drums that I got. I got two examples that I'm gonna play for you guys of a great example and something that I think is like normative. And I'm gonna show you guys something that's actually really dope. So here's something. This is the average of what we get as engineers. Can y'all hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, bet. That's playing in. There we go. Okay, that's the rim shot. Let's go to a place where it really gets active. So this is normative. Like, now this sounds decent. It's not terrible. You know, I've gotten a whole lot worse, but this is a great example because this is normal. But I want to point out a couple of things about this recording. So I'm going to actually solo some stuff. So let's solo the kick. This is a great reason why, as an engineer, I would actually use a sample. Let's listen to this kick. That's the kick. You can actually hear the entire kit faintly bleed into the kick mic. Now that means
that 10-inch tom sounds sweet. I can hear that 10-inch great.
Oh yeah, you can hear it. No, it sounds. I'm not even talking about its tones at this point. I'm dealing with bleed. This is bleed.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like the 10-inch tom is coming through just as clear as the kick drum.
Wow. Yeah, exactly. So when you consider that, like, what am I gonna do with that? So the kick is going where, boys and girls? The kick, in case you don't know, is going straight up the middle in a mix. We don't pan kicks. Kicks go straight up the middle. So if I add compression to this, if I turn it up, guess what's coming up the middle, boys and girls? All of that bleed is, especially when I add compression. Compression makes louder things softer, and softer things what? Louder, boys and girls. So when I add compression to it, it's going to bring all of that stuff up. And then you get the drummer or whoever says, why does the toms sound like they're mono? Because they're going up the middle and we compressed it and we're using that kick. This is like a normative, more normative, not totally normative, but more normative of an actual recording that we get in cases like this. Now, here's a solution. Again, I don't talk about problems without talking about solutions. There's sessions, what you can do, and I know Jan and even Aaron can comment on this as well if y'all want to. I want y'all to actually. One of the things I've done as a recording engineer, I've taken like a blanket and threw it over, the floor tom to help isolate that kick mic in there and help keep the bleed from going in there, because everybody's room, everybody's situation is different. You know what I mean? Everybody's isolation is different. Everybody's setup is different. So that's one thing I've used to mitigate bleed or minimize bleed, because you're not going to be able to get it completely out. It's almost thoroughly impossible without gating and doing some extra tricks. But those are some things that you can do to help with mitigating bleed. You know what I mean? Comments you guys got on that?
Put an expander on that bad boy. I mean,
Yep, an expander.
A lot of cats sleep on that. Gating is literally just the door slams shut, the door slams open. But when you put an expander on there, the door closes a lot slower.
Yep, and you mitigate that.
It's like you're
you don't even have to close it all the way with the expander.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? Like,
how do y'all feel about manually gating, like the toms?
Yeah,
we do that. I do that all the time. I did this with this record.
Yeah, we clean them for sure. Like, that's, So I think that, but when you do that though, when you start to cut the original source file
Mm-hmm.
and that tail ends, it is
Come
going to
on.
start to sound more digital. It's going to start to
Exactly.
sound more. So some people actually mistaken replace drums, and it's like, no, it's not. That's actually your kit. But after all the processing that we had to do on your
Mm-hmm.
drums to combat with 60 cents, it sounds replaced.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Okay.
gets cut
Yeah.
You
off.
know, like, because I've asked John, like full transparency, I've asked John, like, did you replace those? He'd be like, nah, like, okay, cool. I mean, you just must have, that's
Yeah,
the
we
result
work with it.
of the cleaning. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's funny.
I'm going to go to bat. Listen, the type of engineer I am, I'm going to bat for your drums. Like, I want for them to sound good. I don't want, because using sample, this is again the misconception. We think samples is an easy button for engineers. It's not. Like, because again, we don't, a lot of times, most of the time, we don't have the original samples from your kit. So we're trying to make it work in the context of a mix with samples, that work. So yeah, we have to deal with this. If I can clean that, if I could put a gator or an expander on that after the fact, it would be great if you could have some outboard gear that can clean that up, or you can gate it going in. If you know how to use outboard gear, that's what they're gonna do, recording with that in mind. That's an art form to it though, because if you do it wrong, you're gonna mess up your recording going in, and you've committed, because when you're pre-processing, you're committing to everything going in. But Kick, I mean, his snare actually sounds really, really good. He got some really good, let me find the snare top. Now, other thing I want to fuss about is, if you guys can see it, his naming conventions. I mean, I I was able to figure out that this is floor tom, FT, I guess, but there's no consistency between the rest of his toms. So I got FT for floor tom, and then I got RT1, RT2, RT3, just RT3. So I'm assuming that stands for
Rack Tom.
What?
Rack Tom.
Rack tom. I don't care, as an engineer, I don't care about whether or not your toms were racked. I just care about, is it tom 1? Is it tom 2?
Tom 1, Tom 2, yeah.
Is it 8-inch? Is it a 10-inch? Those are helpful. 8-inch, 10-inch, 12-inch, 16, because I know how to treat them. I know what they are. I know those things. But initially trying to figure out information, when I drop it in and it just says RT, I'm just like, what? So if I go down to this other track down here, I have better naming conventions. I got Tom 1, T1, T2, T3, T4, T5. You know what I mean? I got all of that. Drum room, snare T, snare B, room 1R, room L. I got that. Those are, so whether you guys want to admit it or not, naming your files is a big part of being a great professional drummer, making sure that you name your files correctly, so when we do get it, we're not confused about what it is. So log off lids and learn how to name your files.
I see that comment from Jordan. Yeah, but put Tom at the end of it. Don't just put 8, 10, 12, 16.
True.
Because when we're putting the session in, when we're uploading the files in the session, Pro Tools has a unique way of disorienting things. Like,
yeah,
I don't
have an example.
I got to solve for all of this, and this for engineers and or producers, whoever sending files. On the engineer side, take the time to make a guide for your clients that lays
good.
out
exactly
how you want your files to
layer it
be,
in the
how
first
you want them to be named, all that kind of stuff. Like, I even have it to where the folder that they send, it needs to have a specific name, because I have specific stuff set up to where when the files come in, it does certain things to it. So they have to use that kind of stuff. But then on the producer side, if the engineer doesn't give you that, send an email, make a phone call, ask, like, hey, I'm getting ready to send you these files. Like, how you want me to name the drums? How you want me to name the synth? Like, what do you want me to do with these files? Because at least that way, you've asked them specifically for their naming conventions, and you take the time to do that for them. So now that's that communication, keeping the lines open and getting on the same page.
And I see, I one of the things I'm looking for an example on my computer. I can't find it on this particular one, but I've had drummers send me, and I end up doing it sometimes. I just rename them when I get them in. They actually put drums on the front of their file, like drums dash snare 1, drums dash. You know why that is helpful? The reason that is helpful is because when we get, if your stuff is named, overhead, kick, whatever, in a file system, remember that's showing up alphabetically. So when I drop that into whatever DAW, Pro Tools, Logic, whatever, it's lining up alphabetically, just like this did. This I lined up alphabetically. And so why that's important is I got 150 other tracks that are named different things. And so I have to go, a lot of tracks that I get when I get from producers, I have to go through and look for the drums. Because overhead is somewhere down there between the Oberheim and the rad synth that they called it. It's somewhere in between there, and then snare is down below that, and then tom is down below that. You know what I mean? And hi-hat is way up here in the, you know what I mean? So naming the files is a big thing. I don't want to get lost there because I know we can that's a whole nother concept. But
whole different convo.
Yeah, his snare, here's a snare. That's the snare bottom. But here's the snare top. That's actually really clean and really good. So I'm gonna go to bat for that snare when I hear it. But it's clean because I've gotten snare tracks that have you can hear the entire kit. It sounds like a mono overhead. That's how bad they did it. But something like this, I'll show you as an engineer something I would definitely replace, not layer. I would replace this, and that is his rim shot, because this is how his rim shot sounds. It just doesn't sound good. So I know I have a rim shot that is going to sound better than that. That's going to cut through the mix a whole lot better. So I'm probably going to select that, trigger just this section, cut it, drop it on another track, and then trigger just that rim shot. You know what I mean? And just mute the source. That's something that I would do in the mix because I know that I got rim shots that sound way better than that. And I don't have to spend time trying to make that work.
That's a good point that you're starting to get to. You know, sometimes when it does come to the mix, you do have something that you just say, oh, I know this is going to work. I know this is going to work so much better. Like, you just know. It's no different than a producer, you know, if you get a rough track from somebody and they have a synth bass on it and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I got a Moog right here that I know is going to cook much better than that little synth bass they use. So it's like, okay, yeah, sometimes it does become maybe a by default thing, but again, it's the full spectrum of understanding the mix and where it needs to be, and knowing, oh, this is going to get me there. Because sometimes it's about speed. And sometimes it's about what you like as an engineer in terms of your sound, because I know drummers say this. I see this as a, you know, when they clocked in the lids that morning and got ready to start stocking the shelves with all the caps. They'll say, you know, when a producer calls me or somebody calls me, they call me for my sound. And I think Aaron said that. That's not a shot at you, Aaron. Definitely, I'm not shooting at you at that particular point, because what you say, I'm gonna clean that up in a second. You know, but producers and artists also call engineers for their sound as well. So we're both getting the exact same call, both for our sounds. Now, I think there's a dissolution to be made between whether the question is, did they call you for your sound or did they call you for your performance? Because those are two different things. I work with producers that called a specific drummer, maybe a Calvin Rogers, maybe a Spank or whoever, and they called them specifically for their sound. And so when it comes down to the mix, they will tell me to preserve that sound because that is what is important to them. But the vast majority of producers, that is the normative part of it, they call the drummer, they call all of the musicians most of the time for their performance. And so there's a difference. If like someone like Aaron that's called for his sound, if the question is about his sound, you know what I mean? And that is translated all the way to the mix engineer, and then something else comes out on the other end, then we have an issue to really talk about because the engineer did something he wasn't supposed to do or did something unwarranted. You know what I mean?
That's a good point, because I've been in a situation where, and I was telling one of my friends this the other day, I think this is my gripe with sound replacing.
Okay.
there was a session that I did for somebody. It was an artist and the producer, and he approved of my drum sounds. He approved of everything, right? So everything gets submitted, everything gets mixed, the final product comes back, it's released,
Yeah.
and my snare is when I say it's completely different.
Wow.
Like I couldn't wait for my snare to come in because I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I gotta hear this mix. Bro, he put in this deep ballad snare. So I called the artist and I'm like, bro, did you tell them to change my snare? He goes, oh, I didn't even notice that your snare was changed.
Wow.
He was like, he said, I didn't tell them to change anything. So then I called the engineer because I knew the engineer,
Mm-hmm.
the mixing engineer. I said, hey, bro, I said, what'd you change my snare for?
Yeah.
He was like, oh, man, I'm sorry, man. I just needed a ballad snare on that one.
Yeah. That's a different conversation
Yeah,
because that's
is-
totally different. Because if an engineer is doing that, and that's really more on the producer than it is on the engineer as well, because the producer, that means he was just as negligent. And I've dealt with people like that. I deal with producers like that are just totally hands off. I've been in sessions. I was in a session, like, I think I talked about this yesterday. I was in a session and the drummer, the producer was in the session. He brought the drummer into the session. We were recording it right here, right out there. We were recording it. And when I say the producer was so hands off with the drummer, like the drummer was not, I was hired to be the recording engineer at that moment, but I ended up having to sit in the producer seat before it was over because the producer was so hands off with the record. And I'm like, we record, I'm listening to it. I'm like, that doesn't work for the record. That's not, we should be doing 4 on the floor right there. What is he doing? And so I look at the producer and I say, you cool with that? Yeah, I think we could take it again. I'm just like, bro, produce the record. Like, what are we doing? So I just, at a point, it just got on my nerves and I just jumped in on the talk back. Hey, bro, we need to get 4 on the floor right here. Like, producers need to be just as hands-on with the mix and as the, engineers are. Like, it's a collaborative thing. So if that happened to you, and I'm sad that happened to you, that should not have happened to you. You know what I mean? That means that the engineer was dealing with a producer that was just like, I just need to get this mix. Here you go. I trust whatever you give me. You know what I mean? And that should not be the case. I like working with producers that know what they want. They give me what they want, and they're communicative throughout the process. With that said, I'm going to show you this second situation that I got that there's a little bit different. I actually got these drums from Cedric Thompson for a record that I mixed for him back last year. Really dope record. And I'm gonna let you guys hear these drums that were recorded, I believe, in like an actual studio without board gear and all of that stuff like that. Then I'm gonna point out a couple of things about this after I play this example. Now, instantly you can hear a difference in the sonics. And these are the raw files, so to speak. Now let's go back to this other one. Let's listen to this other one. These are raw files on both. About the same amount of tracks too.
I mean, you can look at the waveform and see the difference, bro. Like,
yeah, you can.
You can see the difference in the waveform.
Listen to that.
And how it's recorded.
Exactly. Listen to that. Now I'm gonna point something out as well with that the producer did. This is what the producer did. This is what Sid did when he sent this to me. Number one, he gave me a kick trigger. There's a kick trigger in here. So I have not one kick trigger, I have 2 kick triggers. That's the actual kick. That's the actual kick, sorry. This is kick trigger 2. So I got 2 layered kick triggers. This came from the producer. After he recorded, he added in 2 samples on top of that. And listen to the difference in the bleed on the kick drum on this one. You can hear it. but it's nowhere near as egregious as this other one was. The toms are almost non-existent in there.
Yeah, I mean that's either really great mic placement or again, like Jan was saying, the expander.
Yeah.
And they sent he sent the processing with it
He sent the
already
processing
done.
with it. Overheads are clean. There's just depth there. So it's definitely higher quality mics.
And
Better
where it's
placement.
going in, yeah.
You know what I mean? Versus overheads on here, these overheads. All I'm got is cymbals. I don't got no snare in the overhead. Like, I don't know how that happened.
Look at the waveform, man.
Yeah, look at the waveform. Let's make it bigger. Look at that. Literally, all I got is cymbals. How I don't even know how sonically that even happened. I don't know. I don't know.
I think they
They're probably
rolled,
on the outside.
They probably that, or they rolled off the low end already.
Yeah, but them overheads versus these overheads. Those are overheads, and it adds more depth to the mix. And then he did the same thing with the snare. So here's the original snare. Let me find it. Hold on, I'm trying to
Yeah, he already edited the overheads. I can tell by the waveform they already edited.
Yep. So this is his snare top. Way beefier. But he also gave me a couple of triggers. Well, he gave me a trigger. So he gave me a trigger. And listen how it complements the original snare. It's almost the same. So when you put that in context, there's not much I have to do to that as an engineer because the producer has already done a lot of the work for me. And the toms are also cleaned as well. Check the tom track. So if I take these, I'm having to do this with two hands here. Zoom. Look at how clean these tom tracks is. Like, these are things that either the producer definitely helpful when the producer does it, but most of the time we have to do this as engineers. We have to go through and clean and gate our. We have to go through and gate our own toms or clean our own toms. So he went and did that for me. So it results in a much cleaner drum track with more depth. Because I don't care what you do, you can't getting those toms as clean as possible, like out the jump, is very difficult because you're working with so many mics. And so these are the things that we don't talk about in the process. This is people get out here on lids, they log in the lids, get on this app, and they start capping and start doing all of that, and you don't understand anything about the process. You don't know anything about this process. You don't know that that's what the engineers have to do. You make assumptions, and you know what I was almost at the Bible. The Bible does not say anything about assumptions, about that whole A out of you and me. The Bible actually does not say that. But I almost
it don't
said
say it that way, but it's in there. It don't say those words.
Yeah, it's in there somewhere.
But it's in there. It's definitely
but you
in
know
there.
what we say, what people say about when you assume, when you make assumptions, what happens. And so you definitely don't want to assume anything in those moments and in those things and with these situations. Like, there's a lot of things that go into recording drums, and there's also a lot that goes into editing drums, and there's a ton that goes into mixing drums. So I wanted to do this. I wanted to bring us all together on this because, you know,
You got
there's
Aaron sample pulled up?
You said what now?
You got Aaron sample pulled up?
Oh yeah. Let me pull that up while y'all testing. And y'all can throw y'all commentary in there while I find that.
Yeah. While you doing that, let me grab a couple of these comments because we got several in here.
Yeah, let's do that real quick.
So this first one we got: as an engineer and guitar player, when I track guitar, I set the tone for the track via the console, amp, etc. And I don't want to hear my guitar routed through an amplifier emulation plugin and ruin my creation from an agreed upon tone. So that kind of, to me, that kind of goes back to what we were saying about the communication. That communication needs to be open to where, from your tracking session all the way to the mix, that is understood that these tones have been agreed upon and approved, and they do not need to be changed.
It don't
like,
need to
at
be
all.
touched.
Like, don't touch the tones
Log off lids.
of these things.
Log off lids. Stop capping. If I did not hear from you during the mix process, log off lids. Log off lids. If I didn't hear from you, I don't want to hear from you after the fact. Get in there. Get in the, if you really, this is the thing that constantly blows my mind about this conversation. If you really care as an engineer, I need to know that. I don't get in these files. I don't have them pulled up, but these files, let's pull it back up. These files, they did not come with instructions. Sent me these files. He gave me concept. He gave me his triggers. He gave me what he wanted. It made it easier. But this didn't come with no instructions. Even the performance of the drummer. Listen to how he's hitting those toms. Listen to how the toms sound. Let's talk about the performance of it. Where's this? There's a moment where he just really lets loose. I think it's right in here. You could tell that's probably a part of the song where there was probably something major going on based on his feel. But I don't have no impact. I don't feel those toms. It sounds like
it sounds like clear heads too.
It does. Yeah, I'm just going. That's what it feels like.
Those are definitely clear heads, bro. There's
yeah. Where's my attack as a player? I'm pretty sure if we threw that to Aaron and said, "Give me that section," that joint gonna sound like Animal on the drums, bro.
Yeah.
That joint gonna sound like where is it at? So that's a whole nother conversation when we get different about recording. It's not just about what your tones is. It's not just about what your gear is. It's about how you're even playing as a player.
Touch. So so a major thing that I've been noticing too is a lot of people approach a session by playing like they would play live.
Yeah.
And it doesn't resonate. It doesn't translate well on wax when you're playing with that type of aggression.
Preach the word, Reverend.
In the studio under microphones, because I always tell my friends and homies that are getting into recording from home that, these microphones are picking up frequencies and different things that we cannot hear with our own ears. So you have to adjust your playing to the room that you're playing in and to the mics that you're playing into. So touch is a big
touch.
deal.
Yeah. Big point. And even with that, like I said this yesterday on my live, like I was in a session with Aaron Lewis a few years back, and we sat down. They were making the setting up the set. We were actually in a church. We were tracking in a church because that's where Aaron tracks a lot of his records is at his home church. So we was there at the church. I was sitting on this session. So the drummer sits down. They had to set up a certain way for church where they was playing at church, So the session drummer sits down, and the first thing he does before they even started putting the session mics on there, the first thing he does is he lifts his cymbals up about 6 inches higher than where they were positioned when he's playing for church live. So the ride cymbal that's normally like right here was like up here. You know what I'm saying? When he was doing his thing. So when I saw that was the first time I had saw anything like that. Because he was a shorter guy too. So it looked really, really funny when he was playing because he was reaching up here to hit cymbals as opposed to something that's more, in line when he's playing live. And so when I saw that, I was like, why is the cymbals up so high? And Aaron was like, he was like, man, Doc. He was like, Aaron's like, hey, Doc, man, that's because we got to get ready for the bleed, man. He's like, if you lift your cymbals up it's going to help with the bleed because those cymbals bleed into those tom mics, and that is one of the most egregious things we have to deal with as engineers is mitigating bleed. So if it could be gotten right at the recording level, then it helps us out on the back end. So Aaron had enough foresight on the beginning of that thing to at the recording to record with the end in mind. I want to make this simple for it to be mixed. So let's make these toms as clean, these tom tracks as clean as possible. So they lifted up the cymbals so they're not as close to the tom mics. You know what I mean? So it's little things like that you know that you can do to help. Like I said yesterday, there's no right way to do things, but that doesn't mean there is a way. There isn't a way to do things. There's several correct ways to do it. There's several wrong ways to do it, but there are ways to do it. Whether it's this or that, the end result, the proof is going to be in the pudding and the sound quality.
I think we got a comment about that actually right here. It says, I think another thing is that there is a lot of conflicting information on recording, mixing, engineering online.
Facts.
Even down to drum mics and placement. For example, one expert will say how important something is, and then another will come out and we can't see the full comment.
they capped us.
But basically, he's basically saying, you know, like there's conflicting information, and to your point, there's no right or wrong on a lot of these things. There's multiple approaches. I mean, when you talk about drum micing, you got the whole Glenn Johns approach, which is only 3 mics on the drums, and in gospel, most of us would be like 3 mics on the drums. There's no way we can record drums with only 3 mics, but Glenn Johns did it and has done it that's been a huge technique, especially in rock, you know, soul, R&B type records for years. But it all goes to context and what you're talking about and what you're after, you know, having those discussions about, hey, what kind of sound are we going for? What are we trying to do here? Because that lets you know what you need. Typically in gospel music, we do want that more direct, in your face, punchy sound. So we are going to close mic every single thing that we possibly can. I mean, I know Ashton, he has a mic on his stack. Like there's literally a mic on the stack. But that's very useful in a record where he's smashing that stack, because you get to, in the mix, you can bring that thing up and really get it to cut through the mix. Same thing in metal. Like they will mic up a stack or a china so that way in the mix it can get brought up. But if you never put a mic on that thing, how can you expect for it to come out in the mix? Because again, there's only so much you can do, and the more you start turning things up that are mixed in with other stuff, you also bring in the other stuff along with it. So it's always, you know, a case by case basis on certain things. I mean, there's a lot of good and bad on the internet, but they're all also just context and understand what we're talking about. If you're watching a video about rock recording, you got to take it with a grain of salt, because it's not gospel. It is a different genre. So, you know, they might do something crazy with the room mics that we would never do in gospel music. That doesn't make it wrong. It's just a different approach for that particular thing.
Yeah, if it sounds good, just keep rolling. If it sounds good, you stay with it and you make it happen. And we got some videos on recording drums. We got tons of videos on mixing drums. We have products that will help you mix drums. Yosh Drum Warehouse. Where's it at? I think I got it up here somewhere. Just in case you're interested, you know, we don't want to turn down.
I got you.
Put me up. There we go. There's a QR code. Yosh Drum Warehouse, y'all. If y'all are interested in it, you go there. It's gonna take you to the page where you can see all of the videos and all of the stuff that's on there. This is sponsored by Gospel Producers. This is the Hangout, right? we got to make some kind of money, right? So if you're interested in taking your drums to the next level and utilizing samples, please check out Yosh Drum Warehouse. All sales are final. You know how they do that little fast thing at the end of a joint. Thank you for scanning the QR code. And if put it up for just a second, I'm just gonna say something. I'll put it back up. Hold on. If you scan it, if you screenshot it, you can scan it later. So even if you didn't scan it like on the screen, if you're like watching on mobile, you can screenshot it and it will, and then you can go into your photos and you can tap it and it will take you to that. Take you to it later on down.
Does Android do that? I know that's an iPhone thing. Does Android have that function?
I don't know if Android does. If you Android, you know, you don't need to be on the stream anyway. Get off my stream with those Androids. No, I'm Josh. I don't know. I'm assuming it does whatever Androids do in this day and time. Anyway, so we finna pull this up here because okay, let's see. My man's Aaron, you know, he's been talking really good the last couple of days about, you know, how much he cares about his tones and how good his drums sound and all those things like that. So we about to see how these drums sound out here, Aaron. He's a raw. He sent me a 2-track. So I don't get the individual. I don't get to see how clean his process is on the back end. But we do get to see what these drums actually sound like. And these are raw. There's nothing on this channel. This is just me soloing exactly what he sent me. Let's see what we got here. Ooh. Yeah, it sounds good, Doc. Ooh. How did I lose it? There we go. Ooh. Yes, sir. Aaron Smith, you guys. Aaron Smith, you guys. Great stuff, bro. So
Yeah,
tell us a
sounds
little bit
good.
about your actual setup. Like, what do you, I know you talked about 25 snares, 50 cymbals, all of that stuff. Like, what's your mic setup? What's your room setup? Like, what is some tips and what are those things that you can give drummers? Good, that's good. Thank you for putting that up, Dale. Stuff that you can give the recommendations for what you use to capture and get your tone sounding like that coming out the gate. I love the upfrontness of that snare. That joint sounded good.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. First of all, if you guys have any pointers, any of you guys down here on here got any pointers, let me know how I can enhance my sound. But
Yeah.
I would say I use a lot of Odyx stuff, so I'm signed with Odyx. So D6 for the bass drum. It depends on how I feel. Sometimes I use 2 D6s, one for the outside, one for the inside. D2s for the racks, D4s for the floor toms, if depending on how many floor toms I may use. I5s for the snares, always top and bottom. Usually my ride mic is a Shure SM137. My hi-hat mic is a SCX1 by
Nice.
Odyx. And then also my overheads are 2 ADX 51s. I'm trying to think what else. Sometimes I'll use an SM7B. Sometimes I might like the flatness of like a SM57 because they record very flat. But the i5s I feel like are like an EQ'd version of the SM57, so I like those a whole lot. And then as far as like what I'm going through, so I got two 18i20s and
He
a
got the focus right. He
yeah.
got the focus right. We've been talking about I didn't know you had a focus right. I did not know you had a focus right. We've been trashing focus right the whole stream, and I didn't even know my man's had focus right.
No,
That's hilarious.
So I got 2 of those as well as I got an Apollo.
Okay.
So,
okay, the Apollo. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I put my overheads into my Apollo. But everything else goes into both of my 18i20s.
Yeah.
But then as far as I use UAD everything as far as plugins.
There you go. Yeah.
So I kind of got a temporary setup right now because I don't own this house, so I don't want to do too much major changes yet. Until I'm able to get into my own space, then I'll start implementing way more recording gear and all that other stuff. But for right now, that's just what I have so far.
That's good. And so, I mean, because the room sounded really good. That's what I was. You cleared that up. So, what are you using to kind of do that temporary setup? Like, what's the like acoustic treatment that you're using for that? Because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of other people that are in that situation. They rent, they're don't, whatever. They don't want to do permanent damage to, something like this. So how do you mitigate that?
Okay, so there's a guy named Mitch from
Mhm.
Mute.
Mute, that's my guy. I've been talking with him.
So Mitch lives literally 10 minutes from me.
Oh wow.
Nice. Oh man, you lucky.
The headquarters, the headquarters for Mute is 15 minutes from my house.
Dang.
So he came by and gave me measurements of the room and all that stuff. And he came up with a way, as you can see in the back, we put up all this wall, but the blue wall is all over the room, but you can tear this whole room down in 15 minutes.
Sweet. That's good, bro.
So
that's
it's a
super good
thing. So we put stuff like on the ceilings and everything. He used a recyclable material, but when I say it's awkwardly quiet when you come down here, it eliminates everything. So like I can cut vocals down here, I can cut everything down here and not have any issues of nothing. Like this room is dead. Like it's dead. There's no reverb in here at all.
No, that's clean, bro. No, that's super clean. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. Like, you don't work for lids, Doc. You don't work for lids. You ain't out here capping. You definitely don't work at lids. You got the thing. You're one of the more you have the right to talk about different things like that when you're in a situation where your tones have been replaced, when you were called specifically for your sound. I totally, that's the reason why I went live and responded, because I'm like, okay, Aaron is somebody that actually is, doing industry work, doing session works, 25 snares, 50 cymbals. But all of these other people that work at lids, they just employees. I don't pay attention to what they saying because you work at lids, bro. Like, I've heard your drums. That did not sound like your stuff ain't sweet. It was going through the Focusrite, but your room ain't set up like Aaron's is. You know what I mean?
Hey man, I'm gonna upgrade from the Focusrite soon, but they've been working wonders for me so far.
You gotta use what you got, bro. Like my first keyboard stand was an ironing board. So listen, you gotta use
coffee table for me, Doc.
You know what I'm saying? You gotta use what you got, bro. But
yeah,
I think that's the only thing I forgot to mention earlier was talking about sound is actually learning the sounds of these hardware devices, learning the sound of what a Focusrite sounds like, what a UAD sounds like, what a Mackie preamp sounds like. I had a Mackie Onyx 880. I ran my drums through that because I just didn't like the sound of the Focusrite. It was clean. It is clean, but the depth of the depth capture is like almost like non-existent, just in my personal taste of listening to different interfaces. So like that's just something to think about too, is like what interface you're recording into. If I were to use a Focusrite, I would send it through a whole bunch of stuff first and then let the Focusrite get it last in the chain.
All right, I gotta clean up this Focusrite thing. There's Focusrite and there's Focusrite Pro. Those are two different things. I'm using Focusrite Pro gear. But even on the Focusrite side, there is the low end, and then there's the mid end, then there's even the higher end of Focusrite before you even get to the Focusrite Pro. He's talking John when he said Focusrite, he's talking about the bottom.
We talking about the bro. We're not talking about the. I mean,
but
bro.
This comment that I just put up,
I was gonna go get it, but I didn't want to get up. I'm talking about that. I'm talking about that joint. That one. You got that, and you out here on work. You out here clocked in the lids, bro. With that, you out here clocked in the lids. Calling out engineers, and you sent us something tracked on that.
So this person says, since y'all talking drum mics, how much should you spend on drum mics? $500 is cheap, but $5,000 doesn't make sense to me.
How do they sound? I talked about this on my live last week.
Preach the word.
Use your ears. Your ears will tell you everything you need to know. Research these mics. The
I got
there's
SM57s, bro. Them joints is $100 mics.
$100 mics, but it's the staple of
Yeah.
snares and radio broadcasting.
Even Tom, you can use
vocals,
them on
even
toms.
You can use them on
even
Tom. You can use them,
even on
but you can
toms,
run them
like,
through a
you know what I'm
pre.
saying? Like, you got to use
Yeah,
your
EQ
ears.
them. It's a lot. It could be as cheap as you need. Like I think somebody said it. One of y'all said it earlier. No, you said it. You said it, Aaron. You was tracking digital reference before the pandemic. You know what I mean?
did.
Like,
I
and I'm
tracked
pretty
digital
sure
reference
you had
years
some
ago.
good records that came off of them. Because you know what you're doing. That's a difference. It's a difference. It don't matter what you use or how much you spend. But I will tell you, you do get into a different timbre and you get into a different like sonic, when you spend more money. You know what I'm saying? My dude, Desmond, he's out of Chicago, but he's in Nashville now. Black Drum Hippie. If y'all follow him on the
that
truth,
boy is serious.
That guy.
the truth, the way, the truth, and the life. If I get a session from Desmond,
you don't have to
need
worry
samples.
about nothing.
Period. You barely have to work. It's like, yep, 2A, CLA 2A, call it a day. Compress it, call it a day. And just not even heavy compressing, just like just 1 dB. Just the compressor's just doing that. Just that. We good, Dez. He is a monster. But Dez also put like 15 racks into his recording rig. I'm talking API, Neve pre's, this compressor, that compressor. His rig is like lust worthy.
And you can hear the difference.
You can hear the difference. Here's the other thing. Here's what I'm gonna balance that out with. You could go spend as much as Dez did on his rig, but if you don't know what that gear is supposed to sound like, if you don't know what a good mic snare is supposed to sound like, if you don't know how to place your mics, tune your drums, even strike and play the record right, you just wasted $15K. If you
here's another thing on that. So we talking about $15K. This person said $5,000 doesn't make sense for them. So if you know that that's a little bit out of your range, but the stuff that you like is in that range, you might got to take a step back and say, hey, I'm not in a position yet to put together my recording rig. So what that means is when you charge people to record, you need to add in what it's going to cost for you to go and record at whatever local studio has that set up. That way you can still get the sweet sound that you need to get. Because at the end of the day, it's about getting the job done. So you go get the money, go pay, go record at that studio, send the artist the files. Everybody's happy in that situation. Like it doesn't make any sense for you to buy stuff that you know doesn't sound good. Like Jan said, use your ears. If the thing that's in your price range don't sound good, it don't sound good. Like, you know that.
Well, see, that's the thing. I think ultimately too, you hit a good point too, is because people refuse to just invest. If you don't have it, just go to a studio that has it. Like before I even had any recording anything, I would always pay. It was $50 an hour, but I would go to a professional studio and just cut covers.
That's cheap,
if
bro.
that's what I had to do.
That's cheap.
But it was cheap, exactly. But I would book like 2 hours, but he would have like all the top-notch mics and everything, like preamps, all that I didn't have to worry about. All I had to do was just press record on my phone and then get the files from him. Yeah. And so it's just all about just investing and making sure that you can get the best sound possible. Even if you can't do it, go somewhere that has the best sound possible, literally.
And learn what that sounds like, because that also puts you in a position to hear your stuff going through Neve pre's, through APIs, through a SSL, through 2A, through that. It gives you the opportunity to ask questions. Get in there with the engineer. Hey, why does this sound like? How did you get my hi-hat sounding like that? Then you can sit down and watch him tweaking and watch whatever and watch how he got that tone, watch how he EQ'd it. What frequency was that you did? Because that 8-inch sounds sweet. What did you do to make that sound sweet? Because like I said yesterday, y'all need to log off lids, cut the cap, and I love lids, y'all. I'm a snapback person. Like, I live in lids. That's like when I go to the mall, when the wife and kids are walking around doing all their thing, I go to lids because it's one of my favorite stores. That's where I got this hat from. I found this. They rarely ever get like paraphernalia, like Star Wars stuff. And I walked in lids one day and they had a Star Wars hat. I was like, bought. Anyway, so get off lids and get in there and learn how to engineer, learn how to record, learn how to tweak, learn how to EQ. Tones is not a digital reference mic into a, I'm gonna say it the focus right because it's the butt of the joke today. That's not tones, bro. Like tones is like literally what you did from the tuning all the way to the EQ to the saturation to the processing you did on it. That's the tone. And if you send that out, if you take the time and really care as much as you like cap that you care, like then these would be different conversations. I can trust your word if I know you really care at that level. I can trust your word if you were the dude that were in the thread with me, you know what I mean? Letting me know that you didn't want that. I've been in threads with guitar players that said, I was in a record I mixed recently that had Johnny DeBose on it. DeBose was in the thread. You know what I'm saying? Because he cares about what the outcome is. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've been in several other things. Like, I want, as an engineer, we want to hear from the players. Otherwise, yes, we are going to do what we feel sounds right. But if we know that this is what the record needs or what the producer wants or what the engineer or whatever anybody wants, we're collaborating. And y'all step out as soon as y'all hit export, and then y'all come back later. Like I said it yesterday, y'all be in a hole with these files. You know what I'm saying? Like, y'all hit these files, export them, and then we don't hear from y'all till like 6 months later when the baby done been born. Baby done been born in 6 months, 9 months. We don't hear from y'all till after the baby done came out. And, because if it's 6 months, it was premature. So we don't hear from you until the baby is born. And then you come in and complain about how ugly the baby is. And I'm like, yo, you wasn't here when we was birthing the baby. You wasn't even in the emergency room when the water broke. Like, log off lids and stop capping. So that's just my point of the matter. Folks, but this has been good. Dale, we got any last minute kind of thing? Because we've been on almost 2 hours. This has been a really dope conversation.
Tackled everything. We talked about the mics and different types of mics and miking. We talked about let me see. I guess we can hit this one. I think we kind of hit it. But correct me if I'm wrong. But engineers aren't replacing the drummer's performance, just the sounds that are coming from the drums. So they making the drums sound better on the record. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the process. It's all about
essentially.
I don't personally replace. Here's a couple of, for those who just don't know because you've been working at lids too long. Yeah, I'm not letting off of that. Because y'all been working at lids and y'all don't even know the difference between like what replacing. I'm not talking about you, Ken. I don't know. You're genuinely asking. But replacing is done when, for me, this is what I do with replacing. When the sound is so terrible or the bleed or whatever about that particular source is so egregious, word of the day, boys and girls, that I can't like do anything with it. No amount of EQ, no amount of compression, gating, expanding is going to fix what this source is. The source is terrible. So I have no choice but to replace it. So I will use a plugin like SPL Drum Exchange or Trigger, and a lot of the DAWs have built-in plugins and ways to trigger without using Trigger. And I will trigger a sample using the transients. It reads the transients coming in from every hit on the drum, and it reads it and it triggers a sample that I load into that software. So that's what we're doing when we're replacing. The more popular and the better way, what I like doing is layering. I typically, like I said earlier, I don't typically mess with toms. I EQ them, try to make them fit. I, compress, verb, little things like that to make it feel good. But I typically don't mess with those toms at all unless they're terrible and there's too much. There's too much cymbal bleed. There's too much whatever. Then I'm replacing. Otherwise, I'm leaving it alone. But I like to layer snares. Layer kicks. It's a concept that Yosh told us yesterday on the stream. He logged into my live and said that they've been doing this for over 40 years. So replacing and layering has been going on since the 80s. You know what I'm saying? They've been doing this since tape. You know what I mean? So what we like to do is layer. So I'll take the snare and we'll put another snare under it to beef it up, to help it cut through a dense mix, because that babinga, as much as you love that babinga, it ain't babinging in the mix. You know what I'm saying? The babinga ain't babinging. The weckle ain't wecking. It ain't doing nothing. It ain't do the Dave Smith ain't smithing. It ain't doing none of that stuff is doing anything. You know? So you just gotta you just got you go. So what we have to do is give your sample, give your snare and your kick a little bit of help to help it get through. Otherwise, like Jan said earlier, 60 synth tracks where they done just literally stacked 12 synth brasses on top playing the exact same chords, and the producer is married to that, and he's married to those horns. That's another joke. Me and Jan be talking about. We call them horny horns when these dudes love these horns. Like, no, trust me, as an engineer, get somebody that's got horns on the record. If they got horns on the record, you about to go through it. I promise you. If there's horns on the record, the as soon as you send mix one, oh man, bro, it sounds good, man. I want to hear more of them horns, though, man. Can you bring them horns up in the mix just a tad bit? Just want to hear a little bit more of them horns. So
we end up sending petty mixes.
We end up sending the petty mix where we just push the horns like all the way up here. Nothing but horn. It's a horn track at that point. You know what I'm saying? So we use the samples to layer, to give more energy, to help it cut through what's already really a really dense mix, because we're dealing with BGV stacks. Like, I just recorded a record few weeks back, about a month ago. The BGVs from that session, I had about 45 to 50 BGV tracks. You know what I mean? On top of 16 drum tracks, on top of, you know what I mean, all of the aux, probably 30 aux tracks, you know what I mean, from the aux person that played aux for it, and then keys and organ and bass, you know what I mean, and this stuff, and then another 20 perk tracks, and then another 15 string tracks. And so we're trying to like get your stuff to cut through all of that. And so it is unfair for you to call an engineer lazy, you know, because it didn't, you know, because you logged into lids, you know what I mean? And you thought that how you played through the Focusrite was supposed to cut. It was supposed to focus right through all of that mix. It's not focusing right through that mix. It's just not doing it.
I'm telling you, man.
It's just not doing it. So that's the difference between replacing and you know, layering. Layering is the more popular option, at least in my case. Replacing is done if it's just there's nothing we can do. It's DOA. It's literally like, you know, and producers will tell you like, hey, bro, we did all we could do. It didn't make it, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've gotten stuff where literally that's one of the first lines is, "Hey man, I'm gonna need you to do your magic on these drums."
All the time,
man.
bro.
Like
every other record seemed like do your best. Do your best. I know I've got, like, you know, it's just what it is. It's just the name of the game. That's just what time it is. So I hope this conversation has been helpful to you guys. You know what I mean? Because, you know, I'm just tired. I'm just tired of dealing with lid support employees. I really am. I'm really tired of dealing with that and seeing all of that on the internet. And I'm not talking about every one of y'all. Just because you posted, if you got mirrored to post, we listening. I don't think it's a brick wall. I just want to make sure. That's why we got Aaron on. We got a couple other drummers that are drummers/engineers on that can give their perspective, because I want you guys to get an understanding of what the process looks like. You know what I mean? It's not just a 1, 2, 3, and to also know that as engineers, we were hired just like you were hired. We have a sound just like you have a sound. We put hours in just like you put hours in. We put time in just like you. We work for the producer just like you work for the producer. it's not where the engineer, like the producer, does not hand the record over to the engineer and the engineer says, "Thank you, bye. I'm finna go do what I want. I'm finna go ahead, mix this and upload this to iTunes. It's my record now." We don't do that. If you hearing it on Spotify and it ain't what you played, it wasn't us. It wasn't our decision. That was what the producer, artist, the person who hired us asked for, settled for, compromised on, or more importantly, collaborated along with us to achieve that sound.
And I call Cap again because we never brought this up.
Come on.
Folks back in the day got fully replaced, like actually replaced, like a whole nother musician is on the record.
Oh, bro. Remember I told you about that yesterday.
That's the time that I came up in. I played on stuff and I cut organ and I listened to the record. I'm like, oh, that's definitely not me, bro. Like,
bro,
I never played,
like,
you know,
I get even from the mix standpoint, like we talked about. I think me and Dale talked about this. I think we all talked about this back in our praise. There was a comp record, a pretty big comp record that came out last year that I had done a mix for an artist for, and I was told that it was going to be on the comp record, and I was really excited about it because that was going to be a pretty decent placement that I would have been like, hey, check out this comp record right here. I had this mix that landed on this comp record or whatever. And I was pretty excited about it until the record came out and I realized that as soon as I heard the drums, I knew it wasn't my mix. I'm like, that's not my mix. Then I started listening. I was like, no, them ain't my vocals. That's not my mix. Mm-hmm. That's not my mix. They chose to get it remixed. But you know what I did? I did not log into lids, y'all. You know what I did? I had some. I felt a way about it. Yes, I felt a way about it, definitely, because it didn't make the record. I was told it was going to be on the record, but it didn't make the record. And I let Yosh hear the record. I let Jan hear. Everybody was like, "Yo, man, that mix didn't make it. How?" Like, and then they listened to the mix that was on there. It's like, that your mix sounds like 10x that, and they weren't logged into lids either. I trust their opinion. Like, and so I didn't log into lids and go and trash the producer and trash the people who I work with.
The whole genre.
Couple of reasons why I didn't do that. Number one, reputation. There's no reason that I need to go out here and be capping like that. There's no reason to do that. And the number two reason, here's the number two reason. Let me get real close. I got paid. I got paid, y'all. Paid good to mix that record. I'd already made my money off of it. So it wasn't making me any more money being on the record, on the comp record. I'd already made my money. So why would I be out here logged in the lids? Anyway, that's all I got for you guys, man. Like, this has been fun. This has been really fun, man. Y'all got anything else, Dale, Jan, Aaron, man, anything else you want to add to the convo, bro? And then we're gonna
nothing.
Benediction.
I just wanted to say, first off, I hope I truly didn't offend anybody by my wording. I could say that my wording could have been better in my original post, because, you know.
Yeah, no. I laughed.
I just want to make sure to also just bring awareness. It's not just to engineers, but It's even to anybody who is trying to record, because now that we do live in this golden age of home, like what Jan said, bedroom recordings, there's a lot of bad recording happening.
Man.
And if we combat that, then it will make the engineers' jobs way easier, because they would rather use our real tones if our real tones are recorded properly.
Exactly.
And so, you know, I've seen, even for myself, like I had a friend of mine who's mixing for my record, and I accidentally, because he's one of the ones that likes my drums completely raw, nothing on it, I sent him my processed stuff, and he had to replace with my samples, because I sampled everything. So he took my samples and replaced them, because there were certain things that wouldn't translate well in the overall mix. So then we layered it with my other drum tone samples. So I do understand layering completely, and I respect it completely, and it's definitely necessary. I would say, I guess my gripe would be, if we are going to replace, then I think it needs to be a situation where um just communicate, at least with me, just communicate
Yeah.
to
Yeah, for
me.
sure, man.
You know what I'm saying? Just communicate, and
For
then
sure.
that way, because most cases, at least for me, like, you don't have to replace anything. If there's a tone
Yeah.
that you don't like,
Let me know. Yeah.
then let me know, that so that I can go back and fix it. Because it's not even a situation where I can't recut the same essence or same vibe again.
Or better. Yeah,
You know,
you know.
it might even be better now that I've sat with it, and now I've formulated ideas, and I know that what it is that I want to do. So now I can go back and redo those tones. You know what I'm saying? But to be approved and be like, okay, cool, and then I'm
Mm.
thinking that it's going to
I know
be
the feeling, bro.
my stuff, and then I'm hearing, I don't even hear 8-inch anymore. It's just 10, 12, 16.
Yeah.
I'm, oh, okay, got you. I'm completely replaced. The only thing was saved was my overheads. But I've been there. Like, there was a record that literally just recently came out. It's a Detroit based gospel artist, up and coming artist. And my homie, he's the producer, so I kind of know how he is. He wanted me to cut from home. He liked the version that I cut from home, but he's the guy that he has to be there. He wants to be there. So we cut it at his church. And church recordings to me isn't always the best.
No.
So we cut it at his sanctuary. And when I got the drums back, I automatically knew that they were going to be replaced,
Oh
because
yeah.
it's the capture. Just the capture alone, I knew that they were going to be replaced.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, literally the only thing that was saved
Was the
was
overheads.
overheads, because I heard my distinct ride cymbal. But everything else, it was like an 80 snare with a ton of reverb on that joint, and to the point to where they even cut up my drum patterns.
Oh
Like,
wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I've seen that happen too. I've seen that happen. But it's a I don't like replacing whole kits. You know how, and y'all know, and you do there. Like, you know how much work it is to replace an entire drum set? Like, that's not a point and click situation. It takes hours to replace a full kit. Because you
yeah,
got to clean the toms. You got to make sure the transients are hitting. You got to make sure that you're not missing toms. You got to make sure, you know what I mean? You got to make sure that everything. You got to try, especially if it's something that's got ghost notes where he's playing and
we
those ghost notes
charging
in
for
there.
that. That is not included.
That is
absolutely.
not included with the samples. You cannot pick up ghost samples. Do not pick up ghost notes. And if it does, it's gonna sound like machine gun.
Yeah, it's gonna sound weird. Yep.
It's gonna sound super weird. So it's one of those things, and I appreciate that hearing that from the drummer perspective and hearing the engineer side is bringing both sides together to like show you that, like, look, there is merit to how things, like, again, us as engineers, we don't want to replace, and drummers don't want to be replaced. You know what I mean? We want to make sure. So it all lies in one thing: the capture. That's the number one unity part that we land in. The capture has to be good. So turning your resignation to lids, go learn how to capture better, and you won't have to worry about being replaced. I guarantee you we will not touch the drums if we don't have to, because that's less work for us. If you make our job easy, we out, bro. We not gonna mess with your stuff. But if your stuff doesn't sound good, or the producer has a different vision or whatever, that's we're out of it. We're just doing the job just like you did it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's just the way it is. Govern yourselves accordingly. And the next time I see y'all logged into Liz, I'm gonna link this live under the. I'm gonna link this whole live in the comments section, and I'm gonna walk away. Is what I'm gonna do. You know what I mean? And I'm gonna post a meme of somebody with a lid shirt on too. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do those two things. Link this live with a picture of somebody with a lid shirt on. That's when you see that, you know what's up. You know what time it is. You know what time it is. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we appreciate y'all hanging out here. Bring my music back in just a little bit and get a little vibe going out. Yeah. So appreciate you guys hanging out with your boys. We gonna log off. We got stuff to do. Y'all got stuff to do. It's been an amazing conversation. And y'all guys, make sure y'all hit that like button, that share button, drop the comments, do all of those things you do. We're gonna be back again probably next week with a new topic, whatever's on the menu, as a very important other podcaster that we all love likes to say about stuff being on the menu. We're gonna see what's on the menu next week, and we're gonna holler at you guys now. So y'all be easy, breezy, cover girl. Peace.